The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara Pine. I'm Sara Pine, your host, and today, for our very special 420 week episode, I have Steve Bloom. And for those of you who are in the know, everybody knows who Steve is. He is a writer, a former High Times editor, and he is the publisher of Celebstoner. So if you want to get any of the wonderful stories of the connections between celebrities and cannabis, Steve is your man. Steve, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Sara.
Oh, absolutely. And it was, when we were talking about doing this episode, I was really excited to have the conversations with you because you're one of the first people who really wrote anything about 420 and really brought it into like the collective consciousness. So it wasn't just I guess, would you say it was like more of like a deadhead code for the longest time?
That's for sure.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about that for some of our listeners? I know we'll have a lot who will know some of the story, but I'm not sure how much they'll know.
No, I'd love to. It started for me, pot smoker, deadhead, in general. But when I started at High Times in the late 80s, I decided to cover the dead scene for High Times. There was stuff going on the dead scene back then, a lot of harassment, a lot of arrests. So I was kind of covering it from kind of the parking lot point of view, a little bit less of inside the music. And so I would just, from 80, I stopped going to see the dead. So let's just say, started to see the dead in the early 70s. I actually saw him in Oakland once, saw him in New York first time in 71. And then took a break from the dead after they took a break, and then got back into the dead when I worked at High Times. So I'd taken a long break from the dead, and the scene had grown enormously as far as the whole outdoor scene, the shakedown, and all of that. So for the 1990 run of shows at Oakland Coliseum, the New Year's run, like the 4 shows they would do, say 27, 28, 29, 30. Mm-hmm. I came out for High Times to go to at least one of the shows, which I had tickets for. And so while I was walking around the lot on that first day, the 27th to 28th of December, 1990, I was given a flyer that told the story of 420. And that flyer is pretty rare these days, but I do have a copy of it thanks to Debbie Goldsberry keeping hers. I had mine at High Times, but it kind of disappeared somewhere along the way. Art director never gave it back to me or something. But years later, Debbie had one and sent me a copy. It's a green half-page flyer, handwritten, that tells their story of 420. Not the Waldo's story that is now the common story of 420, pre-Waldo's. Although the Waldo's existed prior to that, but nobody knew the Waldo's story at that time, except for a handful of Waldo's. It was not a commonly known story. Nobody knew. At High Times, we had no knowledge of 420 whatsoever. So I brought the flyer back to High Times and said, look what I found. And we got a kick out of it. And we published the wording of the flyer in the magazine. And then 420 just started to pick up. We just started to see references to it in general, hats, shirts, even record labels, names of things with 420 on it. Not quite like it is today, but certainly it was just kind of lifting off. And that was really the genesis of it. So what the flyer said was this. The flyer said that a marijuana arrest in progress was a 420 code in California. And so therefore, we're going to take that 420 code and just turn it around and smoke at 420. That's essentially what they were saying. Flip the script on 420. It's a marijuana code for an arrest. Let's smoke at 420. That was just the generally logic of the flyer. And the flyer went on to say, and I don't have it in front of me, but I could look for it, that, and the thing that kind of impressed me most about the flyer ultimately now, when you think about it all these years later, was that they predicted the 420 holiday. They said that everybody should get together on the same day, 420 at 420, for mass 420ing at the Bolinas Ridge, by the way, on Mount Tam, where it started. And that's where they encouraged people to meet there. Mm-hmm. And no messed up lighters was on there. Support normal handwritten stuff. It was really kind of funny. And so they predicted the holiday, which we are now celebrating in 11 days. And starting next week with a 420 week now to expand it, especially this year, it's a huge 420 because it's on the weekend, 19 and 20. So Saturday and Sunday 420, awesome. Or no, Friday and Saturday 420, I'm sorry. So 420 weekend. So it's bigger than ever, especially this year. So the flyer predicted the holiday. However, the idea of 420 was contested by the Waldos. We reached out to High Times about 5 years later. So this was 1990, about 1995, 1996. One of the people who was affiliated with High Times when we were doing the cannabis cups in Holland, in Amsterdam, a company had been named 420 Travel or something like that. And so that company got a message from one of the Waldos guys saying, hey, this whole story about 420 is not true. We created it. And so Steve Hager, the editor-in-chief of High Times, went out there and interviewed the Waldos and established that they were the founders of 420. Went on their tour, saw all their evidence, and declared them the founders of 420. And that exists to this day. They did not found the holiday. They did not create the holiday.
Right.
The flyer created the holiday. The mysterious people behind that flyer who never were publicized, and we never knew who they were, created the holiday. And so I kind of give some sort of credit to the Waldos, but I don't credit them for the holiday.
Yeah. God, I wonder who it was. And I wonder if they still go to shows.
I ran into somebody a few years ago when I was out in San Francisco for an ICBC event, and they kind of grabbed me and said, hey, we know you, you're the 420 guy, blah, 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 but there's the real truth of 420. And they went into all this heavy detail. So there is a story at 420.com or 420news.com, I'm forgetting the site, that kind of exploded the whole Waldos myth a few years ago. The Waldos just took it from other people, and they just they kind of stole it. And they took credit for it when there were others who had created it. So I just I accept the fact that the Waldos have been given the credit, but I don't necessarily accept their story 100%. They may not like to hear that when they watch this, but and they see me a bit as a thorn in their side and not really accepting their story 100%, which the media has. It's a silly story. When you come up with the idea of where did 420 come from? A bunch of guys who called themselves Waldos created it. Really? Okay. It's not a really convincing story, but the media likes it, and you'll hear it over and over again in a week or so. Waldo's this and Waldo's that, and it's good for them, but they didn't create the 420 holiday.
The mythology and everything is just so interesting, and I can see the overlap, especially because, especially before Touch of Grey came out, the Dead were big, but they were more niche. They weren't playing huge stadiums and things like that at that time. They were playing large venues, but when they started going mainstream, in the 80s with Touch of Grey, that's when everything exploded and everybody knew who they were and everybody was going to the shows. I mean, there were, like I said, and you know this, it's there was definitely a large following before that, but the whole mainstream thing kind of blew everything up for them and changed the way they lived their lives after that, especially the deification of Jerry and everything. But it's with the Bay Area, there's such an interesting confluence of culture where we're talking about the music with the Dead and the counterculture and cannabis culture. And it's how do you really track a lot of that? Because we have mutual friends that have been in the cannabis legalization scene since the 60s, and they've known all these people and had all these adventures with them, and you have to wonder what high session did certain information get passed on to somebody else, and how does that change through that I don't know, a stoner game of telephone almost.
It definitely is that. And, there's no question it started in Northern California in the Deadhead scene, in San Rafael, most likely, because the Dead had moved up there. They moved from Haight-Ashbury to their house in San Rafael, and that was, the place where the Deadheads would kind of hang out. And so the Waldos, one of the Waldos guys knew Phil Lesh and They had an inside track. They went to shows. They spread the word around about 420 to the dead. They even claimed there was a 420 beer back then that was somehow affiliated with the dead. They have all this information of stuff where they signed off on things saying, 420, blah, 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 so they're proof. And I'm not debating that kind of stuff. I don't think they, make all this stuff up. So I'm not
Right.
saying they made it up. I'm just saying that maybe they weren't the first. They might have heard it from somebody else and kind of like popularized it, because nobody else really knew too much about it. Maybe not. Maybe they created it from the very beginning. What do I know? But again, like you say, it's sort of this telephone, not really sure where it all came from, and it's still sort of mired in mystery, which is sort of fun. So people want to believe whatever they want to believe about the Waldos or the history of it. That's fine with me. I don't have any, I don't have any ownership to 420. So, whoever wants to make their claims, so be it. It's so long ago now, you really can't even investigate it.
Right, right. Yeah, I just remember like back in the day, uh, before like a lot of people in the general public knew what 420 was, but people who smoked did. Taking the day off with my roommate, going to Hippie Hill, smoking, but it was a lot quieter than it's been in recent years. It's really really blown up. People are out there celebrating, and it's interesting because like when I started I was working in a dispensary for over a decade, and during the 215 days, it was a really crazy day where we would get all these really interesting flowers and that we wouldn't get other times of the year because we knew that there was going to be, people like lined out the door coming in to get, and it was one of the days where we worked the hardest, but we had the most fun because people would be coming in, they'd be celebrating, they'd be geeking out on different flowers. Somebody would come in, one of our edibles makers, and bring this like gigantic cake that had like thousands of milligrams of THC in it, which by the way I did not touch because I don't do so well with edibles. But it was like I really loved the spirit of the holiday. And when it started to get like a little bit more mainstream for a moment here, I think we had to kind of take a step back and talk about it's wonderful to celebrate, but let's not trash the town. Like, that's not the way of our culture. That's not what we do. And I like the fact that people have really gotten into it and are celebrating, but it seems like, and maybe it's because we have, especially like here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a lot of dispensaries, so they don't seem to get the same traffic that they used to, which, I guess from like a financial standpoint probably isn't a very happy thought for them. But for me, I just like the excitement of having all the people in and hearing about their celebrations and what they were going to do. And I think that, part of the 420 celebration should also be, as we were talking before we started recording, honoring a lot of the people who came before us that are the reason that we can actually celebrate this today or next week, and really look at, the fact that a lot of us owe our livelihoods and our careers to all of the hard work that these people did and really bucking norms because it was a big deal.
Well, the beauty of 420 to me, the 420 events, the concept 420 is great, but the 420 events, really date back to Santa Cruz and Boulder. The original events that were student events on campus that was controversial, that students would skip out of class at 3:45 and go to some spot on the campus, the Diag or, at Boulder. I went to the Boulder events twice. They really are the best cannabis events I think I ever attended because they were flash mobs. They were not organized with a stage, with somebody telling you what to do and no central kind of leader. No vending booths, nothing. Maybe people walking around selling some edible cookies. That's about it. Maybe a few joints here and there. But the kids show up, and they start lighting up at about 4, and there's a huge cloud over the Diag by about 4:15, 4:20, and then 4:20 comes. Everybody cheers. Big cloud of smoke over the mountains of Boulder. Uh, and then the kids go back to either class, really stoned, or they go into town and they party for the rest of the day. But it was a blast, not organized, And so, 420 has I see 420 is canceled at Hippie Hill this year. You heard about that, right?
Yep.
And that's and when I posted that, a lot of people were like, good, sort of, because it got too big and out of control, and creates a big mess. I mean, that's a good news that a lot of people want to come to the event. 20,000 people want to come to Hippie Hill, but maybe it's inundated and too many people for that place. And some people felt, oh, it's now sponsored with tents and stages. We don't need all that. Well, that's how things evolve over years. They get bigger and bigger to the point where either it can't operate any longer or it continues to get bigger. In this case, the city pulled the plug. Sponsors were not kicking down, which I'm really surprised. And so they really didn't have the funds to really move ahead, which is kind of a sad statement on 420 coming out of the capital of 420, San Francisco, that they can't fund a 420 event. It's gotten too big. Oh, that's a problem. It's too big. That's good news that all these people want to celebrate on the same day, for cannabis legalization, for normalization. They just want to get behind it. So I think that's all kind of good. But at the same time, we sort of flash back a little bit to New York, and New York was behind the times of 420. Never had any major events. Only the last couple of years with legalization in New York has 420 become a big deal. And now we have a flash mob event in Washington Square Park, which I love. It's, again, organized but unorganized. No stages, no leaders, just a lot of people show up there and just strut their stuff and Greek flags and whatever flying and just have a blast. And it's a really sort of disorganized event that works. And that's what 420 really is about. Disorganized events that work, as opposed to organized events that you have to pay a lot of money to go to. But again, I'm not against that. Let the bands make their money. I mean, 420 used to not have anything happening in New York. Now, 420 weekend has like concert after concert, Cypress Hill and Method Man and Redman and all the Locks and all these great hip hop acts all playing 420 weekend. It's a blast. If you're a hip hop fan in New York, come to New York on 420 and go see 20 shows. It's amazing, the lineup. That's just evolved in the last 2 years.
That's awesome.
It used to be Colorado had the best lineups, on 420. And I think that's dropped down. I'm looking around seeing who has the best lineups. New York's taking over the best lineups as far as programming for 420 event-wise. Colorado used to have, all the events at Red Rocks and in town, but they're no longer the center of 420. Maybe New York is taking over as a center of 420 because there's so much going on here. So the evolution is okay with me, but I can understand the concern of the growth of the event to the point where it's no longer effective or it's sort of outlived its purpose, perhaps. Or maybe they just need a bigger location than Hippie Hill. Maybe they need a bigger part of that park, to house that many people.
Yeah.
Thing was that last year, now that I'm working with, I'm also the director of the New York City Cannabis Parade, and we do it as a team and run this event. And last year, we teamed up with the City of New York. With legalization, City of New York wanted to work with us now instead of sort of see us as a problem or a protest group that's always giving us a hard time. Now the law has passed, it's changed. Now we're working together. The city is working with us on our event. And I saw that San Francisco was doing the same. So I'm kind of disappointed that San Francisco pulled the plug. Why don't they work together? Why did they pull the plug? Oh, they don't have enough money? Really? I mean, come on. One day a year, they can't just have some people come there and pick up some trash? That's such a big problem. One day a year, San Francisco can't do this? I'm disappointed in San Francisco, where, by the way, I've lived twice.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I was at the Weed Week press conference last Friday, and the mayor was there, and she was making it very clear that they support 420 and that it was because of the lack of resources and the lack of sponsorship. But she's also been on the record saying that she doesn't support it in the past. So I mean, but politicians, there's that. But I think that it was a unique opportunity, especially like when we're looking at like the advent of cannabis tourism, to have people going to cities that they love, that they know have a strong cannabis culture. And when you look at like, New York, San Francisco, both cultural centers, in our country, it'll be really interesting to see how it evolves and watching like New York's approach, because we're a little more homegrown over here. Northern California, we're more on the hippie side, whereas like New York I've been seeing like just the programming throughout the year, even getting into like fashion and cannabis and more sophisticated things. So I feel like the 420 celebrations are evolving to the point where there's almost like a form of that celebration for everybody. Like if you want to go and do the big thing with everybody and smoke the giant joint, you can do that. Or if you want to have something like a little bit more, a smaller thing, or go to music. And I feel like it's, like my husband played with the Dead when they were in there, well, with Bob and Phil and Further. And he was saying that he was so excited when New York legalized, because they would come into town for the shows at MSG. And I guess the engineer for the Empire State Building was a Deadhead. So he'd change all the lights so they'd be all tie-dyed. And Jeff said that like one of the things that used to really bum him out was when they would hear about kids in line getting arrested for smoking a joint while they're waiting to get into Madison Square Garden. And it's kind of
Yeah, it
like,
was bad. It
yeah,
was even worse. They used to target, the kind of certain areas where kids would hang out after shows and things like that. Kids trying to have a little shakedown around the garden,
yeah,
but they kind of wouldn't allow it. And for years, they were targeting us, and matter of fact, towards the end of Bloomberg's run as mayor, at a fish show at the garden, a New Year's run, I got busted. Not at the show, but outdoors in the parking lot next to the garden, which they had staked out. I got to the fourth floor, me and a friend, little bit of smoke in the car, parked, and then within seconds we were surrounded by cops. It's like, what the hell? I mean, suddenly, first we thought it was security or something, but it was actually cops. They were in the parking lot looking to bust people for smoking in the parking lot or something. It's just like, I got busted, missed the show, the whole thing. I told Fish about the whole thing. I said, you got a big problem. The people I knew at Fish, you know it, but you have a big problem, and you cannot let the police do what they're doing to your fans, me being one of them. They skipped out of New York for a year or two after that, and then they came back. But then again, when they came back, the mayor had changed. De Blasio was a much more friendly mayor to the cause, and he basically told the cops to cut it out. But for 20 years, we were attacked, under the Giuliani and Bloomberg years, when the Dead were rolling into town, constantly. And so it was bad, and I experienced that myself, at the end of that cycle of all the mass arrests for weed in New York, me being one of them. Shit happens.
Oh no, what were you gonna say?
Shit happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I'm glad that it's starting to subside, depending on where you are, of course, because, I always forget, because I live in this bubble here in the Bay, but we still have areas in our country where people can't freely do that. We still have a few states where you can get in serious trouble for smoking cannabis.
Still 25 states that are not legal, so, we've kind of accomplished the goal in the more liberal states. Now the problem is getting it done in the more conservative states, which will probably take a federal law to accomplish. I don't see Idaho ever passing weed legalization without the federal government forcing them to. But in the New York area, our focus, we had a big, run of states legalizing over a short period of time, especially in 2021 when New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut all did it at once. But we still have nearby states like New Hampshire and Pennsylvania holding out. And that's part of our concern, to get that, So, when we put our messaging out, Cannabis Parade, New York, yes, we won, but other states still haven't. Let's party, but also think about them and see what we can do to help them out and put some energy towards those states getting it done. Otherwise, they're in the situation we were a few years ago.
Right, right. And also, even when legalization passes, really, putting policymakers' feet to the fire to create better programs. Because one of the things that I've seen over and over again with legalization is that it's not exactly giving people an easy way of entry. Like, all the states have had their issues with setting up their programs. And in California here, we had a lot of people who were upset after legalization because a lot of their favorite brands went away, prices got higher, they were mad at the industry. But really, the issue was that policymakers have an outdated view of your average person who uses cannabis. And they think the people that they see, or they think they see using cannabis don't matter to them, because they still think that we're sitting on our couch eating Cheetos, hitting the bong, not voting. And, especially with an election year, I think one of the most important things for people to understand is that they actually have a lot more power than they give themselves credit for. And the past few years especially have really fatigued voters. But you have to get out there and let people know that, you contribute to society, you pay taxes, you use cannabis, and you vote. And then we can start getting more inertia going with this, because these people depend on our votes to keep their jobs.
Well, it's a double-edged sword. Look at Florida. Florida is now going to be voting for legalization in November. Florida is the fourth most populous state. It has a huge medical market, but it's also overrun by the MSOs.
Yeah.
They own the state. 20 companies run the state. Trulieve has 130 stores in the state. And they are bankrolling this to the tune of 40, 50 million. Obviously, they want to take their stores and sell to everybody. And that's understandable. But where's the room for anybody else to get in the door there? So I'm for it, but at the same time, I'm not totally for the overtaking of the industry by a handful of companies, which they're already doing. And whereas in Florida, that's what the plan is. In New York, it was completely opposite. Make the big companies wait and let the smaller companies get in the door first. And that, is a really novel, idealistic approach that has been targeted by lawsuits left and right. And really has put a lot of strain on the rollout, some of which has been right and some of which has been wrong in sort of the way they rolled it out. But what was right was to give people the opportunity first, and tell the MSOs to back off. They backed off for a year and then they sued. And they got in earlier than they were supposed to because they won the suit. They were supposed to wait 3 years. They only had to wait 1 thanks to the suit. Now they're in the door. But by the way, to get in the door, they had to pay $5 million each. And there's 10 companies in New York that have the licenses. Started as medical companies with 4 stores each and one grow facility. And now they are being given the opportunity to expand into adult use stores. I'm not against that in a lot of ways. To some degree, it's wrong to have companies in the medical market, which didn't do well in New York, and lose a lot of money during those years. And then when adult use opens up, they get shut out, when they really put in the time, some of them. Maybe not all of them, or maybe some are bigger ones, care so much, and smaller ones. There's small MSOs too, they're not all huge. There's small ones that have 5 stores. Right. Or 10 stores instead of 50 or 100. So, it's not all equal when it comes to all the MSOs. Treat them fairly. So I felt bad, especially for a women-run company in New York called Etain that was shut out. Then they were sold to RIV, and it's RIV's problem now to get in the door there. But RIV paid the $5 million. I don't think Etain would have ever been able to afford that. So that's just the way it works these days. It's it's big money. Wins the day in the market. But I'm happy at least that New York has tried a different approach, and it hasn't been shut down yet.
Yeah, I was really happy.
They're trying to shut it down one way or the other to overrule the whole thing and just say, okay, let's do over. But I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think you can do the do-over once the genie's out of the bottle.
Well, the do-over would be basically change the whole licensing program, let anybody get licenses, don't make it specific to certain people at this point, and they've already had their break in the door, now open it up to everybody. Which is more or less kind of happening, but still New York wants to. I mean, you go in New York, it's really unique. I mean, pretty much all the stores are run by Black and brown people. The people who work there are Black and brown. It's like a whole different thing, basically, as opposed to, I mean, it's integrated, but it really is mostly run by Black and brown people. And each story is a fascinating story. I'll meet the owner and I'll say, what happened to you? Because they call them justice involved, people who got the license because they had been busted and did time for weed, And so the stories are really interesting. Each and every one, you listen to these stories like, I went to jail for this, I did that, blah, blah. And then, they're trying to come all the way around. Their life is now coming all the way around to having a store. How wonderful. And really, and when you think about it. But what's happened in New York too is not talking about the illegal market, like California is a huge legal market. The legal market has really caused, a lot of stress on the legal market, making it really hard for new legal stores to make money in an environment with their illegal stores down the block selling for less. And furthermore, the stores have put the so-called legacy market of dealers completely out of business. So people who are doing door-to-door sales, the home dealers and delivery services, are all pretty much gutted because
Wow.
of those illegal stores, not because of the legal market. The illegal stores are putting out all the dealers out of business.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
it
I know
blew.
nobody has any business anymore. It's like their business has dropped to zero because you could walk to some store down the block. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it really, has impacted. People seem to forget that the legacy people who built this market are all out of business unless they somehow either got in the door for a legal store, which is very hard to do, very expensive, and a lot of work to make this all happen, or they decide to jump into an illegal store just for the hell of it because there's money there because there's foot traffic and they're making money hand over fist because people are just walking by left and right, and there's nobody at the door checking them. They're in and they're out fast. It's a simple system. You just so right. New York has like 3 tiers of sales now, or even 4. Adult use legal, medical legal. The stores that are illegal and the dealers that are still operating. So there's a lot of weed around New York being slung, but but who's benefiting from it is really a question.
Yeah, well, I was in New York last April for MG Unpacked, and it blew my mind. Like walking down the block, like how many places there were selling weed, and how much I smelled it in the air. I was like, this is totally different than the last time I was in New York. It totally blew my mind because last time I was in New York, it was your friendly dealer with a backpack who shows up. It's got stuff in there. You choose what you want. Depending on who they are, they might have a few other things to choose from. And that was that. And now it was like just so open and it was crazy. And when I think about like, the traditional market, when I was co-chair of the legalization task force in San Francisco, we were having these conversations. It was also the beginning of our equity conversations. And telling my colleagues that the people in the traditional market were artisan growers and entrepreneurs that needed to have an easier way to get into the legal market, did I get the looks? And it was like, it's a very interesting thing that, people who start out in the legal market who may not have had a background in the traditional market, how they're seen as, there's still stigma, but there's still like some more legitimacy about it. But then the people in the traditional market, and I think especially because we are looking at like sure, there are white folks that were in the traditional market, but there's a lot more black and brown folks that were in the traditional market. And I think that there's a lot that has to do with the optics around that too. And that always really got me. And I think if we could have if there was more ease of entry, a lower bar for getting into the legal market, and then let the best brands and companies win. That's how I look at it. Like if you have amazing flower and you're able to, partner with somebody who has amazing business sense, which is hard because as we know, there are a lot of sharks in the water trying to take advantage of what's going on, but there could be some really beautiful things that are happening. And I think there are, but there are just so many challenges. And I like here in California with our large traditional market, a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have, it's really expensive to do business here. And with the taxation, people aren't purchasing as much. They would prefer to go to their person or go to some of these underground cannabis farmers markets and things like that because they know they're getting quality flower. They know they're getting it at a good price. And they're mad about how expensive things are. And the state wonders why they aren't making the tax revenue that they could be. And they could be making a lot more if those taxes were lower.
Well, I try to tell people support the legal stores. If you're going to go around the corner and go to your illegal store, fine. But go out of your way
Mm-hmm.
occasionally and look for the legal. One of the problems is where I live. There's no legal store within a couple of miles easily. I live in the Bronx, north of Manhattan. There's 3 stores in the Bronx right now, legal stores. It's a big borough, over 1 million people. So there's hundreds of those little stores selling illegally because they can't keep up.
Yeah.
With the company, yeah, they just cannot open those stores fast enough, the legal stores. Manhattan's crowded with stores now, 20, 25 stores, maybe even legal stores. But there are hundreds of those illegal stores. So, it's just, I keep on referring to it as the balance, that it's sort of right now, the illegal stores sort of up there, the legal stores down there, and it's kind of has to work its balance to even out to the point where it comes the other way, where the legal stores are dominant, the illegal stores are kind of there, but hidden, tucked away down a side street, whatever, not on the main streets, not competing with. But at the same time, the legal market has to be competitive with the illegal market.
Yeah.
In other words, are the products in the legal market as good as the products in the illegal market? No, they want to scare people away from the illegal market here in New York. Oh, it's not tested, it's bad for you, it's got stuff in it. Most of us New Yorkers know better. We've been smoking untested weed forever, and most of us haven't gotten sick. So that's generally not the issue. It's just general quality is the issue. Is it good? Is it bad? Not it's moldy. It's not this. It's not full of pesticides. Probably not. So that's not really, so most New Yorkers don't fall for that when they try to scare you off from going to the illegal stores. Oh, it's bad for you. You're going to get sick. No, you're not. Or most likely you're not, unless you just really get a bad bag. But so, that type of thinking, I don't think works. I don't think it scares off the average New Yorker. And obviously it hasn't, because they're going to those places. The other thing in New York I would consider a mistake is that the rollout only allowed outdoor growing. So the first 2 years of the cycle have been outdoor because the hemp farmers got the gig. The hemp farmers were growing because of the Farm Act, allowing hemp growing in the state a couple of years ago, started to build out their farms for hemp only. And then the state said, okay, you hemp growers now can grow THC weed. I'm not saying they grow some nice stuff, but I think there's a perception that, and I know I'm going to run into this with you because I know California loves their sun grown, but there's a perception that indoor weed is better than outdoor weed, better quality overall. And people prefer the indoor to the outdoor. I don't think that many people even know all the weed in New York is, except for the medical, is outdoor. But I think they know that the quality is a little bit less. I've experienced that too. You have to really search around to find stuff that might look good but may not smoke great or may not be the best high or whatever. And the other thing in New York is that New York has a lot of rain, and during the grow season, we've been getting a lot of mold, and things need to go indoors. I know it's not great for the environment, but for growing purposes, New York's getting too much rain. And during that time of the year, if it hits hard, hurricane season, August, September, October, the plants get seriously damaged. I've seen it, and I've heard it from the growers. So I think the bulk of New York cannabis should be grown indoors, and they will be more competitive with the indoor market that's flooding into New York with California brands that people like.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see when the day comes that we have interstate commerce, where the outdoor weed starts coming from, where sun grown comes from. Because I think, it's like when I go to Arizona, of course they don't have sun grown there. They can't grow outdoors in Arizona. Right. But there will still be indoor craft growers, and especially I think too for people who are like, when I used to work behind the counter, sometimes I'd get people that would be more into the aesthetics of the bud than anything else, which I always thought was perplexing, because I'm like, well, it could be pretty, but what if it doesn't work well for you? Then isn't that kind of like a waste?
Well, it's a good starting point. What it looks like in the bag appeal is a good starting point, and then you go from there. Looks good, smells good. All right, at least that's, check those off, and then go try it, and see if it's, up to the standards of the smell and the look, But I judge things quite a bit by bag appeal.
Yeah.
And the weird thing in New York too is that you can't see anything before you buy it. So back in the day of California medical dispensaries, where the famous jars and the tweed and the the tongs and stuff to pull it out and you get it, that was the dream. That would be the dream of how you would distribute weed. You could see it, you could pick it out. I'll take that, maybe even smell it pre-COVID.
Yeah.
I agree. Don't put your nose in my jar. I agree with that. These days, COVID, I don't want anybody sniffing. And they have those sniffer jars. You see those, right? I'm not even crazy about those. Everybody's putting their nose in the same place. No.
Oh.
even
Yeah.
though we're better now than we were a few years ago as far as the COVID stuff, we've learned a few lessons about where to put your nose, for things like that. So it's tricky in New York because the quality is not necessarily great. We don't know, and you don't know what you're getting each time until you kind of try different brands and see. And there's a lot of brands, So it's a little, you don't know what you're buying. So I will, even though prices come down to $200 ounces, I really won't try a 200 ounce in New York because I just don't know what I'm getting. You can't see it. The bag is opaque. You just, if I'm going to spend 200, I want to know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
And they're not,
Absolutely.
and they won't allow it in New York. They won't even allow a peek through window in the bags. They won't allow you to see it in a jar. I mean, I don't know why they're so uptight about all this stuff in New York. The rules right now on advertising regulations was just thrown out by a judge because they were so uptight. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. You can't use bubble lettering. I mean, you can't, all these things that they don't, appeal to the kids, obsessed with the kids. All the law is obsessed with the kids. Kids getting kids, And most of the people out there are not kids who are consuming cannabis, and yet the laws are not for us. It's for them to prevent them from getting the cannabis. All the bags that nobody could open and things like that. So it's just I think that'll fade away gradually as we get removed from legalization, where they'll soften up their regulations. But boy, they're hard ass right now.
It, it,
You saw California, and now we see it in New York. These hard ass regulations that
it,
treat us like we're kids,
it
like we're
is
the
ridiculous. Yeah.
you know.
Well, and the kids, if you have stuff that's well regulated, the kids aren't getting into the dispensaries. Have PSAs about adults keeping their cannabis in safe places that children don't have access. Most children who are getting access to cannabis now are getting it from the illicit market or, the stores that are selling smokable hemp flower is where I'm hearing a lot of parents that are really worried about that. And it's just ridiculous. And going back, I was just thinking about the smell jars. I hate the smell jars. I when we started bringing those out, I was still in the dispensary and people would I was like, why would you stick your nose right up against something that everyone in San Francisco's done? And then to smell it, they shake it like they're playing Yahtzee. And I'm like, you just knocked all the trichomes off of that bud is thrash. That is not a representation of what you're going to get in the bag. And I'm just like, I don't know, maybe we need cannabis charm school to teach people how to use these things.
That's for sure. I don't know. It just, it's sort of be careful what you ask for with legalization. We're happy we got it, but then look at all these rules they threw at us.
Yeah.
I mean, like opting out, for instance. I just read today what California still has about 60% of its area opted out for cannabis. Opting out should not be allowed.
No.
I don't believe in opting out. It's like a state should, it's like, I guess it's like dry counties, which is kind of stupid, but that's old-fashioned American stuff where the conservative county gets away with it. It's like, that's the same stuff here, so that's what's really killing, California with opting out. They're going to have all these illegal stores to cater to, in the places where there's no legal stores. And same thing in New York to some degree. There are areas that have been opted out. You can't be there yet. I know that started in Colorado originally with the legalization and opting out, and they had a lot of problems in the first couple of years. And then the places that opted out stopped opting out because they wanted the money ultimately. But by and large, but they start with that and they really make it hard for the industry to kind of take hold with all the opting out. If it was everybody was in it once, then at least you have a chance to succeed. But if everybody, I don't want to, no, then how are you going to succeed? And then it gives the opportunity for the black market to step in and take that business.
Right.
It's so stupid. I mean, bureaucrats don't know what they're doing by and large, and especially when it comes to cannabis, because none of the people who are running these programs, most of them have no experience with cannabis. Zero. They come from other places within the bureaucracy. They used to run some other department, and they shove them over to cannabis.
Yeah.
I mean, in New York, they hired, Chris Alexander, who runs the Office of Cannabis Management, used to work at the Drug Policy Alliance. And that's a good thing, but, maybe Chris didn't have enough experience to run OCM. It's a lot of work, and there's been a lot of problems, on his watch. I love Chris, but it's been problematic, so you need somewhere in between, not the pure bureaucrat and not the pure activist. Someone in between who has a little bit on both sides and knows what they're doing. So they know how to run an agency at the same time they know what cannabis is about.
Right. Right.
You know,
I understand that you need to have people there that are able to navigate that and get people to do things, because bureaucracy is like, it's very much like pushing a boulder up a hill and getting people to listen and work together. But you're right. Like, I feel like that there's a general distrust of people who have industry experience because they think that the bias is going to do something strange and scary to the way things are run, and that, somebody's got you in their back pocket and you're going to make decisions that doesn't serve the people, that just serves an industry. But that's very, very untrue. I mean, of course you're going to have people who do that, but the longer that we dig our heels in and we don't do the work, I often feel too that there's more of an opportunity for players who may not have the best of intentions for the industry or the public to get involved. Like when we passed 64 here, a lot of people will tell me, "Oh, I didn't support it, Sarah. I said no." And I was like, and I'll tell them that I said yes. And they'll ask me why. And I'll say, I didn't agree with everything. But every time it comes on the ballot, there's somebody who feels a little more brave to get involved, who's more of a pirate than an entrepreneur, and they're going to influence policy in a way that it only serves a very few people, and is going to line the pockets of the people who are pushing this policy. And that's something that I worry about on the national level too, because as an industry, as a movement, I think especially because we were underground for so long, people don't trust one another and they don't work together as well as they should. But when we get up to like the MSO level, those people are veterans from other industries and they understand the power of numbers and lobbying. So they will all work together to create policy that serves them, but may not serve small business or the individuals who are partaking in legalization, in consuming cannabis.
it's ironic, with 64, the backlash against it, though it won, people like, say, a friend of mine, Be Real from Cypress Hill, was against it. And lo and behold, the guy now has 6 cannabis stores. So, he was against it and now he's benefiting from it, even though he was against. I'm just writing an article about him opening a store in Fresno. I love the guy. But so everybody didn't really know what to expect, but then it worked out for him.
Yeah.
So it turned out beneficial, but at the time, I don't want all these rules and regulations, but they figured out how to work with it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess you just have to have it. I mean, the idea of like, even in New York, the idea is like, we love the illegal stores. That's really the expression of New York. It's not about the legal stores and stuff like that. And I keep saying, to a friend of mine who defends them, I said, listen, I don't want them to get arrested, but they need to go away. Ultimately, they do need to go away. They've had their fun during this period of gray area sales where they snuck in the door after when New York had legalized it. Cuomo was still governor. Cuomo was not moving ahead on this, so we were losing time. During that loss of time, and then the new governor coming in, a year or more happened where all these stores started to open up because they were delaying and not getting it done initially as far as starting to open up legal stores. And plus, the COVID era left a lot of empty stores all over New York. And so a great opportunity to fill up all those stores with weed shops.
Oh,
and that's what's happened. I mean, there's lots of little narrow stores. You walk in New York, they call them now snack shops. It's funny. They find their ways, snack shops. So you go in there and it's wall to wall Oreos and Doritos. And then in the back, there's the dealer.
Really? I didn't know that.
Or on one side, it's all bongs and pipes. And the other side, it's snack foods, but they use that as their cover that you're going in there just to buy snacks. Or there's another term in New York on the sign says exotics. Exotics is a loose term now for cannabis. So you see the sign. I walked into one of those stores once. I said exotics, and this store looked like a grocery store with a guy in the back. You wouldn't even know that guy was maybe selling weed, but on the front it said exotics. I figured, and honestly, a friend of mine was looking for something that day, so I was quickly looking for something for him. And I went to a couple of the legal stores in the neighborhood because there's no legal stores, and I was out of whatever I had. And so I walked into the back there and I says, exotics, what do you mean? And he goes, well, cannabis. Oh, okay. And he started pulling out bags. Didn't have a lot, but behind the counter, under the counter, he was selling weed. So people are doing their thing in New York one way or the other because people want it.
Right.
That's the bottom line. People want their weed wherever they get it from the legal store, the illegal store, the delivery service, the legacy dealer who's still selling. They are going to go wherever is most convenient for them, and whatever they think is the best for the best price. And the thing about New York is they know, because we've been smoking weed for so long, we know what's good and what's not. And that's why I find a lot of my friends are still going to the illegal stores because they want those California brands. I'm not kidding. They think they're better than anything available in New York. And they'll even pay the high price for them too. They'll pay 60 and 70 a quarter. I mean, eighth. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, well, how many of those brands do you think are real California brands, and how many do you think
Well,
are
that's the
counterfeit?
thing. My friend's been saying Tyson this and Tyson that, and we know a lot of that stuff's coming in. They're just slapping labels on jars, and it's not Tyson. So that's another thing. What's real and what's not, and you don't know, because they could easily just take a jar and counterfeit a label. Not that hard, and just make you think it is. So yeah, that's hard to tell. But ultimately, you'll know by the quality. If you like the quality, then you don't really care what the label says. If the quality is good, you open the jar, oh, this is great.
Right.
Then people generally don't care. Ultimately, they want a good product, and they don't really quite care where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's like if you get something from a legal store and it's disappointing. I mean, and that's it's gotten better here in California, but we still are kind of squarely in the land of mids when we're looking at stores.
Right.
And but it is getting better. But I had a lot of friends that were like, why would I spend that much going to a dispensary when I have a friend who's a master grower and I can get all these interesting genetics that I'm not seeing in the stores, and they're beautifully done, and I'm not paying the high taxes on it. Why wouldn't I go there?
I wish we had that here. I mean, maybe there's some craft a little bit that I've connected with, but I have seen some stuff. There was one event recently in New York that was, I thought it was like a legal company, but it wasn't. It was a delivery service that's still selling that really good stuff. And they did an event where you paid a certain amount of money to do a tasting. And so, I mean, I went for free as media, but they were, turning you on to about 4 strains. And then at the end of the night, they started selling, and their prices were high. $80 an eighth kind of stuff for really high-end craft, and people will pay for that. People in New York have money.
Yeah.
And New York is famous for the $800,000 Wall Street weed back in the 90s and stuff. So New York people will pay for high-end weed in New York. They don't care if it costs. As long as it's good or great, they'll pay for it if they have the money.
Yeah.
Everybody in New York doesn't have that kind of money to spend, but a lot of people make a lot of money in New York, so they're okay with that. And those who don't, they'll scrounge around and look for what's affordable.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating market right now because there's so much there. It's such a buyer's market. It is the ultimate buyer's market. You have all kinds of choices now. You maybe feel bad that you don't buy in the legal store, but maybe you don't care because, you get something cheaper and better, or whatever reasons, and it's up to the state and the city to close down those illegal stores bit by bit. In my neighborhood, I've seen some go. They come and they go. I saw one get closed, reopened. It was near a school, apparently. That might have been the reason. And then they were open for another 3 to 6 months, and then they got hit again. And this time they didn't reopen. Some of them just reopen over and over again. They figure, they got me once, they're not going to get me again. They don't have time to hit all of us because there's thousands of them.
Right.
And there's just not enough enforcement, to hit them all. But for some reason, my neighborhood, they hit a bunch of them, so it's doable. I saw them, if there were 8 or 10, they're about 3 or 4 now, or 1 or 2. So they can get rid of them if they make the effort. They don't have to be bullies. They don't have to arrest anybody. Just basically say, you can't be doing this. We're not arresting you. We might take your shit, but we're not arresting you. We're just telling you, stop it.
Yeah.
This is not okay. Let the legal market survive. We understand, I don't think the police would say that, but we understand why you're doing this. And there was a moment in the middle where you can get away with it, but not anymore. Your moment is past. You had your fun, you made some money, now go away. Or go back to your home and sell to your friends. Do the same, take the weed you're selling in the stores and sell it to your friends who want to buy from you because maybe they think your stuff is better and cheaper. Do it the old-fashioned way. Just close the stores. The stores look bad for New York, and they're bad for the industry, the legal industry. So close them up gradually. And if you want to sell to your friends door to door the way we used to, go right ahead. You're not forced to buy from the illegal market, but you shouldn't really be buying from the illegal market in the stores.
Yeah.
Support the legacy dealers who are home trying to make a living versus the people in the stores where you're not quite sure who owns those. Some say it's all owned by Arabs and Yemeni and blah, 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 and so, my guess is that a lot of those cases, they just picked up a local dealer and said, okay, you can sell in the store here. What do you got? We'll help you buy some more and fill out your collection so you have a lot, and then when people come in the store, they have choices. I'm not 100% sure that's how it works, but it seems like it. So some of the house dealers just went out there and worked for the stores, brought their connects because the store owners may not have the wheat connections. So
Right.
they needed kind of a house dealer in the store to give them the product. So that's beneficial for that house dealer who may have come out of just selling at home. So they lose the gig if the store closes. But I'm just saying, go back home. It's easier to get business on the street because people walking by versus a house dealer that they have to know you. They have to have a friend that call you, so it's more complicated. The beauty of the stores is you just walk in, nobody knows, nobody cares, unless you're underage. So that's the beauty of it for the average buyer. You don't have to make much of an effort. It's convenience. People love convenience in our cultures, and so it's convenience. It's there. Not even make a phone call. Or sometimes in New York, you have to have a reference because they want to make sure you're not a cop or whatever, or somebody spying on you or something. So you have to go through a process to get in the door there versus the stores. There's no process.
Yeah. Yeah. There is.
New York is up against it in terms of solving this problem, and I think it's going to take years, just like you're seeing in California. The problem just go away.
Well, and I think a lot of the things that, as the market's been maturing, we've been learning a lot of lessons too. Because like going back to Be Real, it's like he's one of the few celebs that's actually making money in the cannabis game. Because as we've seen, like a lot of the celebrity brands, they thought that would take off, but the average consumer really isn't so concerned with that. Like a couple years ago, I went to Hall of Flowers and picked up some stuff from Trixie Garcia had her brand, Garcia Select. And, a lot of our friends who are, either, deadheads or have, bands that play, the music, they're musicians that do, dead covers. They're all like, oh, Sarah, I want to check it out. Can I come over and take a look at it? And it's like, yeah, but were any of them really buying it? Maybe once out of curiosity. But like, that brand had so many of those brands have closed or left California.
Well, Garcia, handpicked left California, but Garcia handpicked, according to my statistics that I've been reading from Headset and also another company, Hoodie, they're doing well.
Yeah.
They're the third best selling celebrity brand out there, which is pretty good when you think about all the brands out there. And there are really only about 15 celebrity brands that are doing well.
Right.
And they are Cookies, Caviar Gold, Garcia, Tyson, Evidence, Willie's Reserve, 22 Red, Cheech and Chong's, Dr. Green Thumb, Khalifa Kush, the cannabis beverage, Can, 93 Boys out of Chicago, Dr. Norms out of LA, Happy Ed out of Maryland, Tikal, Primitive, Viola, Belushi's Farm. Everything else is pretty down there. I've been starting to put together these lists of best celebrity brands, and I've been trying to do this for years to get the numbers. And Headset, I tried to work with them, but they didn't kind of provide the numbers. And then they opened up the door to look at their brand information. So I am going through and just picking through their list of brands to see who are the top brands. And that's in their order. And I'm going to start working with another company that has better sales figures to determine this. But their numbers were fairly similar to this, that these are the top celebrity brands. So I guess what I get, and sort of flipping this script on you a little bit to ask you a question, I do get a lot of flack about the celebrity brands. People seem to hate them. I mean, like Travis Barker from Blink-182 announced the brand recently, and I posted that. I've been posting too many new brands because there aren't that many new ones. Kind of the peak of the celebrity brands is a little past, when the first wave of all of them came out in, say, 2015, 2016, so there's not as many now. So I just announced that one because, Travis Barker, cool guy, whatever. And I hadn't done a brand article in a while. I got so much flack. Fuck him, fuck that, fuck this, fuck that. Who the hell is he? Why is he in the business? What did he do? They have to kind of pass some sort of checklist of like their bona fides of what they did to justify that they have a brand. I heard that with Belushi a lot too. Like, how dare he get into the business? What is his background? What did he do? You know, I mean, at least Willie Nelson has put in a lot of time. Jim Belushi didn't. You know, he's into it, but but he chose to get into the business for his own personal reasons. Is that a problem? You know, I think he's a good guy and has a good business out there, but people give him and them flack. Now, the bottom line is if the flack is because the quality of the products aren't good, then it's deserved. And that's what I hear often from people. I don't get to try those brands much because most of them are in California. Matter of fact, the Garcia, a friend of mine was going out to California a few years ago and was shipping stuff back. And so I'd asked him for the brands, and he was a deadhead. So he's looking for the Jerry Garcia. He sent me back some of that stuff. I would say it was okay. I don't remember it being great, but the packaging was fabulous.
Oh, the packaging was total, especially
That's
with
worth collecting.
Yeah, and with the pre-rolls, especially
Yeah,
with the tips and everything.
tin.
Yeah.
I mean, the packaging was like collectible, you know? So, I mean, that alone I was excited for. He sent me the Santana. I mean, all this stuff was okay. I don't know, maybe sending it through the mail by the time you get it, it's not so great. I don't know. But, but still, I don't try them enough because they're not, and now they're being white labeled in New York. Handful of companies like Tyson, Tikal are starting to do white labeling in New York. So it's not really, might be their genetics from there, but it's, the outdoor version of what they would get in another state. So it's slowly seeping into New York, the celebrity brand products. So I don't get to try them much. So I just hear a lot of flack over social media every time I post anything. I'm almost hesitant to post anything now because everyone's going to get mad at me, for promoting another celebrity band. Oh my God, how dare I? I don't get it. I mean, people have weird love-hate with celebrities. They love them and they hate them at the same time. They waste their time by making people focus on them so much, but they still love them and they love their shows and they love their movies and they love their music, but they're still mad at them for one thing or the other. I don't know. People are pro and con about celebs, so I think it builds into the celeb brands here in cannabis that people just have these mixed feelings about them. I don't know why they don't support him. I mean, they'll support Willie, because Willie's Willie.
Yeah.
Willie's paid his dues. If you run down this list, I think any rock band has paid their dues. They've been smoking at concerts and being harassed by cops left and right. Their cars being trailed, their buses being trailed, maybe being busted. I mean, don't all of them qualify? I mean, you might have a question about Tyson, but still, I didn't care for Tyson getting into the industry, but I've kind of relented on my dislike. I just feel like people have accepted him, feel like maybe he's paid his dues. I don't know. So why not, a brand around Tyson? I'm even accepting of that. And that was one that I wasn't because of his rape, history and stuff, and his bad behavior for so many years. But he has kind of cleaned up his act. He hasn't really gotten into trouble for 30 years. So anything we're putting on him is stuff he did when he was younger. He was a complete, total asshole.
Right. Maybe the toad venom made a difference.
Yeah. Maybe these things, maybe weed and all these psychedelics really have improved him as a person. Yeah. I'd like to believe that. So I've kind of toned down my rhetoric about Tyson. At first, I was like, I don't like Mike Bites, but people seem to think it's funny, So what can I say? I don't think it's funny, but a lot of people, it gives a laugh too. So what am I going to do? Just fight them all the time over these things? I'll drop it. It's okay. I'm moving on to the next thing. I don't need to get into nonstop arguing over Mike Tyson.
Well, Steve, I heard that Holyfield actually gets a cut of the.
He does. Apparently, he does. So yeah, Holyfield and Tyson, bonded. I don't know how many years after that happened.
Right.
There was apologies and stuff. Also, Holyfield's a reverend now, so kind of like he'll accept apologies, and you can move on in life and stuff. And if he is benefiting, and who knows what kind of money he has these days? A lot of these guys back in those days were ripped off by managers. Who knows what he has left? Mm-hmm. So I don't mind it now. It bothered me initially, but then I just kind of I'm happy to know that I can kind of change my tune too. I don't always have to hold the same ground on something. I can just okay, whether I'm right or wrong, it's not really necessary to keep pushing the button. Just move on to the next thing. Maybe it's not so bad. The only thing I wish Tyson would do at some point is kind of just basically say he was sorry about the rape, admit to it, and just move on. Okay, I did a terrible thing. I was a bad person, and I want to apologize to her for that. And over the years, he's always said terrible things about Desiree, the girl who he raped, and said and lead people to believe that it was a rigged a rigged court and all those things. So people take Tyson's side against her, which is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible? She was 18. What does she know? He took advantage of her. That's all there is to it. And the court proved it. So, and then after he was out, he he had to go back into jail because he disobeyed his court orders and stuff like that. So he was a bad guy back then. Maybe he's a better guy now. So I can generally accept that when I hear people kind of say he paid his dues, move on. I'm willing to accept that at this point. Initially, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I look back at his rap sheet. I look back at the things he did. I mean, he said terrible things to the media, in press conferences. I mean, awful things. I mean, I won't even repeat it here. Things that they're so despicable you could hold it against him for his whole life. But, moving on.
That's it. I mean, people do evolve. And there is a lot, I mean, as much as we worship our celebrities in many ways, there definitely is like this joy that you see about people taking them down just as soon as they'll prop them up. In Tyson's case, like the things that he did, you're right. It's not, there should be, there needs to be some sort of restorative justice that goes around that, whether he's apologizes or does something to support a group or what have you. But then when you're looking at other brands, like I think some of the judgments that people have are they just slapping their name on something? Is it white labeled? What's the deal with it? Like when I was doing some stuff with when Houseplant was released, like having a meeting with Seth Rogen and realizing like, yeah, they did white label their flowers, but they picked them and they chose they chose a grower that they liked, and he was very involved down to like, the marketing and everything around it. And I was like, well, that's pretty respectable, except for the fact that you couldn't open the damn containers for anything. I mean, it was like those were everyone proof.
What's interesting about Houseplant is that they really are not promoting their flower at all. They're promoting all their accessories.
I don't even know if they're doing their flower anymore, are they?
I don't see that. They're not listed on any of these, sales. They're only I don't know if they curtailed their flower sales, but all I see is Rogan promoting ashtrays, lighters, coffee, sake,
yep.
A bunch of things that are all music mixes. I finally bought. I even have the case here. I finally bought one of his. I bought the his basic ashtray cup holder with the this one. But figured I have to have something from Rogan in my house. So I got this one that's got the the joint holder.
Yeah.
And it also comes with a little vase. This is about $100 something. His pricing is kind of high. Unfortunately, I can't reach out to them in any kind of media way to get their attention to say, can you just send me stuff that I can review? As a media person, I just like free things, and we promote your stuff, and we get free stuff. Doesn't mean we have to like it, but it's like a movie. They take you. They give you a pass for a screening. You don't have to like the movie.
Right.
Your media. Your job is to write about it, and maybe you'll give it a nice review, and they can use it for promotion. And sometimes there'll be a nice review, and sometimes there won't. Records. I've been in the music industry for a long time as a journalist. Used to get records all the time. I have a great album collection. You might see in the background here. I'm a little, concerned about that stuff where you just cannot really properly review anything in this industry. They don't give you weed. They don't give you anything. They should, when they open a new store, they should have a supply for media that just here's a box, here's 5 strains, try them out.
Yeah.
They won't allow any of that stuff, any gifting, also the tough rules, no sampling, so there's no way for them to do that. So I'm just like any other person walking into a store, buying weed and reviewing it. I don't have the money to spend $500 on 5 strains, nor will I, or I just won't. So, I mean, it's a kind of a weird system, how it works. So anyway, I just don't really get to try the things I really would like to, as much as I'd like to, because there's so much out there and it's just so costly. and they don't really provide it to the media in any reasonable way.
Yeah.
That's I've asked a few times. I said, yeah, go on stores, you give some stuff away. It's like, well, they're not allowed, or they'll go behind the counter and get you a pre-roll, which I don't really care for. Um,
Well, they're
I
kind of the
mean,
hot dogs of the cannabis industry.
aren't they? I mean, they're very common and that's good, but I don't trust the pre-rolls in terms of the bottom end of the supply ending up in the pre-rolls. Um, a lot of them are infused now if you get a good infused one, but I'm just kind of old fashioned. I'll roll my own. I know what's in it. I'd rather see flower myself and look at it and determine the quality that way, not through a pre roll. But yeah, they'll give you pre rolls. That's about the most you'll get as a sample from any of the stores, which maybe they can get away with giving out or something. Even technically they couldn't, but maybe they could just do it because somebody else gave them samples or something. They can do that. So it's problematic, for me to really ever gauge, what's out there, the quality of the products. There's so much out there, and I try so little of it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. And I think, from your perspective, it's like how can you report on what's out there if you don't know? And then for the consumer, like we used to have sampling in the 215 days. Somebody would invest in a product that they like the sample of. But when cannabis is so expensive, why would you purchase it if you don't know that it's good? It kind of goes back to when you were talking about, purchasing a whole ounce and you can't see it, you can't smell it. Like, who's going to do that? Especially like even if you've purchased stuff from that grower before, but each grow is different. It's a plant. There's no consistency with that.
It's not quite like wine, right? Because I buy like a $12 bottle of wine, the same bottle over and over again. I go to a store, it's right there. I like it. It's a Cabernet, a California Cabernet. It's fairly a cheap Cabernet. It works for me. It's in my price range. I buy it over and over again. So would that be an equivalent for cannabis at some point where you can actually have a brand that you like, it's always the same and you can just always get it, or like a bottle of wine, or not? It's always going to vary. I mean, can they standardize the plant to the degree that they do with wine?
Not yet. Not yet. And I really and I like the idea of having tasting rooms. I mean, I think that just like with wines where you get to try something, before you buy, it would be amazing to be able to like the event you were talking about, having something like that that's a brick and mortar that somebody can come in and try, things from different farms, different growers, and be able to purchase that. I think that that's like the next step. I mean, even when we talk about like people are talking about consumption lounges not being profitable, I think it's because of the way that the regulations are right now is so restrictive, because if we could approach it in a different way, it actually would be a really profitable model, because especially when people are visiting from other places, it's like they want to have somewhere comfortable that they can partake and not have to worry about looking over their shoulder, or getting a $500 fine for smoking in their hotel room.
You have lounges in San Francisco?
There are some lounges in San Francisco. There are a few, and there's some that are opening up in Vegas, and the biggest concern with people that are talking about these lounges is this model profitable? And I think they do struggle, especially because in San Francisco, your HVAC that you have there has to be able to scrub the air, and it's a very expensive system. I mean, it's like in the six-figure range. So how do you get that investment back if you're not getting, a lot of people coming in, consuming, purchasing product? And I think a lot of that would change if we were allowed here to have uninfused food and beverages available at the lounges as well.
Outdoor spaces probably the best thing for the air regulations, I suppose. But then you can only do that certain times of the year. When it's
Absolutely.
So that's problematic to find places. I mean, New York, we don't have lounges yet. Nothing's legal. There's a lot of illegal places, around New York, kind of smoke easies, and they've been around for the last few years. Um, Places like Happy Monkey, which is not around anymore, Astor Club. But there's a lot of places now where back rooms, there's a place in Brooklyn that I went to recently. It was a nice hang for a product promotion, and the back room was a nice area to smoke out in. So they kind of create a zone,
Hmm.
they kind of get away with, and the thing in New York, smoking regulations, I mean, are the same. The regulations for cannabis are the same for tobacco, and that really was a big surprise in New York's law. Even a lot of us, it was taken by surprise when the law passed and it says, "Is it true that it's legal to smoke in public?" The Cuomo would have never allowed that, but once Cuomo was out the door, he didn't care, and we got the law that we wanted. And so those sort of rules run into some amount of conflict, but by and large, New York, people smoke all over the streets now. The back rooms and stuff, police are not bothering with. They don't care about that stuff. A lot of venues where you can never smoke now are smoked out. They don't care anymore. Even though the laws might say you can't smoke indoors.
Yeah.
You can't smoke cigarettes. Can't smoke anything indoors. It's happening, and there's no stop of it really. So New York's kind of like a runaway train.
Well, and speaking of consumption, because this episode is going to drop in the beginning, right before the Tuesday before 420, I know you know a lot of the great events that are happening. So what are some of your favorites that people should check out?
Well, I mean, again, in the New York area, I mean, on the 419 Cypress Hill's coming through. I'm very close with Cypress Hill, the band. I've known them for years. I put them on the cover of High Times in 1992. We've really bonded over the years. I was in their movie that came out last year, the documentary on Showtime. So anything Cypress Hill, I'm always there for. I love those guys.
Me
And they've
too. I
really,
love them.
talking about people who've been standing up for this cause for years, they're one of them, especially Be Real at the top of that organization, that group. So it's really very competitive. I mean, there's so much going on, and I'm not only into hip hop, but it's very hip hop oriented. So the same night that Be Real, I mean, I couldn't believe it. Be Real has got his show, Cypress Hill, and then Redman and Method Man have a show like in Manhattan. Be Real's show, Cypress Hill, is in Brooklyn. I don't know how I can get to both. Raekwon from Wu Tang has got a club gig. The Locks and a couple of other groups have another gig, and I run myself ragged on 420 in New York, trying to get to everything. These days with everything happening, I'm like, here, I try to set up a schedule. I can go there this time, get there this time, and I just try and hit as much as I can. But for the most part, it's all concert related. I don't really see much. And plus the daytime event in Washington Square Park, which I'll go to, I've gone to the last 2 years. It's kind of just a magnet for all New York stoners, just to walk through that park at some point during the day and, make an appearance. So I'll definitely make my appearance. Plus we have the Cannabis Parade coming up on May 4th. So it's a good time to promote our event. So we'll walk around the park and give out flyers and hit as many spots as we can to give out flyers to promote our event, 10 days later. So 420 is very close to our event these days. Our event takes place the first Saturday of May. So it varies from, say, the 1st to the 8th or whatever. This year we're the 4th. So we're about 10 days away from 420. We're just hoping our weather is good. 420 weather has been fabulous the last couple of years. And then 2 years ago, great 420, 10 days later, total rain out.
Really?
Oh, we had a bad rain that day, a cold rain. And it was sort of at the end of the COVID period. They wouldn't let us have a covered stage. We got soaked. We're back with a covered stage now, but in the COVID period, we didn't have the event in 2020. 2021 came back the year it legalized, and our event was like a month after legalization. The crowd was hyped. Everybody wanted to talk on that stage that day. Schumer came and talked. Letitia James spoke that day. It was an unbelievable outpouring of public support, especially from officials who would never speak at our event prior to legalization. But they only let us have 2 risers and a microphone and a podium that day. They wanted to discourage a crowd because it was still kind of COVID-21. So we downscaled the event, and then the next year we upscaled a little bit to bigger, more risers. And the Blues Brothers were going to play because they were coming through town, and the whole thing got washed out.
Oh.
So we came back last year with the support of the city and got our big stage back, and so we're just we're in promotional mode right now to get people's attention. People know about our event, but it just we're in the middle of town in Union Square Park, so it's hard to miss. And it's not the biggest park, so it's easy to fill up. We're promoting our parade aspect a little bit harder this year to build the parade a little bit more like a pride parade, just bigger, with floats and all kinds of stuff like that. With the city support, we could do a little bit more than we would do in the past.
Yeah.
They give us some money. We raise some money through sponsors. We're sort of in a different state than San Francisco's in. For some reason, the city's behind us, and the San Francisco's not behind 420. So it's surprising. Although I would say this is probably the only city in the country that is teamed up with the cannabis organization to run an event. I don't know if there's any other place that's happened. Thanks to Dashita Dawson, who's the executive director of Cannabis NYC and a very big supporter of our event. So it helped that somebody like her comes from our community, becomes, works for them and knows what we're about. Doesn't have to learn, and she brought us right in saying, come on, let's do this together.
We need more people like that bridging the gap, and we need more areas looking at places like New York and other places that have different things that they're doing right, and not continuing the mistakes that are being made with policy. Like, be inspired by what's working in other areas and try to replicate that.
Well, one of the things I've been sort of saying about the Cannabis Parade event over the last few years is that with legalization, we needed to pivot. Mm-hmm. What are we now? For 50 years, we were a protest organization screaming at the government and the police, to stop arresting us for weed. And sometimes at our event, they did. Many arrests. I was pepper sprayed at one of those events. So, we sort of won the battle, after all these years, got it passed. So then what becomes of our event? Seattle Hemp Fest is no more. They did not pivot. Whatever their reasons, they couldn't continue that event, which had grown very big. But what do you do now? Okay, you're not protesting, you're celebrating. You're having a festival. So our event was known as the Cannabis Parade and Rally. We kind of slicing off the word rally, now calling it festival, because rally is kind of more of like a protest. And, we're there to provide information and remind people of what's happening elsewhere and the federal government stuff and the states where it's not legal. But by and large in New York, we're happy. We got it done. And people are not getting arrested anymore like me, like the hundreds of thousands of people got arrested for cannabis during the Giuliani Bloomberg years. That's over. Yeah. So thank goodness, we've moved beyond all that stuff. But still, when you have an event, where do you go next? Boston Freedom Rally, they exist, but there's not too many. Hash Bash just happened in Ann Arbor. That's one of the oldest events. So John Sinclair, was one of the, not necessarily founders of Hash Bash, but it kind of came out of his experience there when he got arrested in 1970. And the event dates back to that point. There are only a handful of legacy events left. Ours, Hash Bash, the Madison Harvest Fest, the Washington, D.C. Smokin'. I'm not sure if that still takes place. Boston Freedom Rally, it dates back to the 80s. Seattle Hemp Fest, that dates back to the 80s, which is not happening. I don't know any other legacy events out there now that are continuing, the way we are. We may be the only one. Boston Freedom Rally, Madison, Madison, Hash Bash, they take place. So you have to kind of find your pivot. What are we doing next? And so we found our pivot with the help of the city of New York.
That's awesome, because we still need the events. We still need to gather together. We need to have fun. We need to not forget about all of the people who worked so hard for us to be where we are today. Like, shout out to John Sinclair. Is, not just a poet, not just, in the music industry, but somebody who really thought that everybody's right. Everybody should have the right to consume. And they were all a huge part of a lot of the organizations that still exist today, like Normal. But we're also seeing, a lot of these organizations not getting the financial support that they need. So we're at an impasse with like how we're affecting policy. And for our listeners out there, this is where you come in. This is, if you enjoy cannabis, if you want to see better policies, get involved. If you don't want to give money to support some of these nonprofits that support good policy, you certainly can let your policymakers know who you are. And now that it's legal, there's no stigma around that. It's about visibility. It's about letting them know that we are way different than they could ever perceive, and that the policies that are made should reflect that, and not be, I always say, and I say that I joke about it, but it's actually true. It's like policy isn't based on fact. It's based on stigma. It's based on state culture. And if you want to change it, you have the the ability to, and especially in a year like this, in an election year where I think all election cycles are important. We should always vote, but this year especially, get out there, be heard, vote. Vote like your life depends on it, because we really are, the way we live our lives depends on how we vote and how we influence policy. And before we wrap up, Steve, what are some things that you're excited and hopeful about in the future?
These days I'm not as hopeful as I used to be. I'm kind of an optimist, and I usually didn't let things get me down. But lately, the news has been really bad. Obviously, with Trump hovering over this election, that's the worst news for any American who doesn't support Donald Trump. And it's a really frightening prospect that he could possibly win the election. So vote for Joe, please, people, vote for Joe. Don't listen to anything else that people want to sway you away from that. Vote for Joe. He's the only way we're going to keep Trump out of the White House for a second term. That's the only way. There's no other way. Got to vote for Joe. The climate situation is brutal. It's just, I kind of really started my life as an environmentalist type person. As a kid, I went to Earth Day. I really believed in that whole cause, and maybe should have just jumped over and worked with Greenpeace or something instead of normal. I think sometimes that was really my love. My biggest concern was the environment, not legalizing weed. And it's really come back to haunt us, what's happening to our environment. The world is sort of, is in kind of a cataclysm of some sorts, with all this weather issues that's really impacting our lives dramatically, between fires and floods and tornadoes and stuff like that, earthquakes. So on that, and of course the wars that are happening right now, and especially in Israel, is very, scourging, that all of that is happening. So on the positive side, obviously, we've accomplished some of our goals with legalization. The federal side is a slow, process. I expect that to happen eventually. It just kind of has to, although you do see some back turning, from the Republicans these days on a lot of issues. So don't expect support from them. Generally, I don't know why people think the Republicans ever are on our side when it comes to the cannabis issue. They're not, except for one here or one there. I mean, not one Republican voted to legalize marijuana in the New York legislature. Not one. Not one crossed over and voted for that. Thankfully, we had a Democratic legislature. So, I'm kind of, I don't know. Right now, I'm not the most optimistic person. For cannabis, yes, we've accomplished a lot. The yoke is off us to some degree. In the states where it's still illegal, be careful. What I follow on my website, Celebstoner, celebrity busts and things like that, all of them happen in illegal states now, obviously. So be careful in Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, all those places where they're still going after you. They did not embrace our legalization laws, in the legal states. They have not embraced that at all. So really be careful. But I think, it's positive. I think eventually all that'll change. I think, although there's a rollback in Oregon, I do think there will be, a more positive take on legalizing all drugs eventually. The psychedelics movement is a good movement. It makes me laugh a little bit, having been a young psychedelics user as a kid, and now it's all being treated as therapeutic. It's not the way we saw it, nor did we see cannabis as that originally. It was just fun, recreational, experiential, connected, helped you connect with people, break you a little bit out of your shyness to talk more, or whatever it might be, very beneficial. So just keep, fighting the fight, to just remind people that all this negative stuff is kind of bullshit. National Geographic just did a terrible article looking at all the negatives about weed and not presenting one positive. So we really are in kind of a reefer madness kind of period, because with all the legalization, you have a big reaction from those who don't agree. And that's where we have to fight it off. You might legalize it, but then you still have the negative coming from those who are opposed. They don't give up so fast. Even once they lose, look what happened with abortion. They never gave up. And thanks to Trump, they were able to get the law reversed, Roe versus Wade. So don't think that, you could possibly not lose your legalization law in the state. It could happen conceivably. It could get overturned.
Yeah.
So you have to be vigilant, about all this stuff. Don't get lazy. And as far as like Normal and DPA and NPP and all those groups, they do need help. Normal and NPP just considered a merger. They decided against it. Wasn't the worst idea because the two groups maybe together would be more powerful than one and wouldn't have to go seeking money separately and all can get it in one place. But those two groups never got along that great, so they probably decided against it. But it was interesting that they even considered it. But it also tells you where things are at, that that's necessary because there's not enough money to go around in this environment with legalization and the bigger companies not kicking down. I mean, Normal and NPP and DPA always had money from a given rich guy, usually, or woman who plunked down a lot of money. George Soros or people like that, one individual, Peter Lewis, that would pay a big bill. But getting it, a little bit here and a little bit there, I think that's really the hard part. Convincing people, to subscribe when there's so many other things they're being asked to subscribe to these days.
Yeah.
Subscribe to my Patreon, subscribe to this paper, subscribe to that podcast, whatever, to yours. Just people being asked to do so much and they have only so much money to spend. So are they going to kick money to Normal? Are they going to kick money to you? They're going to kick money to me? Where are they going to spend their money? I'm like that too. You only spend so much on things to help other persons or causes. So, those who have more money should really be the ones who spend it. Those of us who have a little bit less, let others pay for those things because they have more money to do it. We're the believers. We may not have the money to support it, but you need the, maybe the lesser believers with the money to support it. They're down with it, but it's not like it's not their number one cause, but hey, come on, get behind this. So I don't know. I'm not a fundraiser, but I am concerned for the livelihood of those organizations. They've been around a long time, but it's also their pivots too, pivoting during legalization. Where do they go? Maybe people think, hey, we've got it done already. Why do we need to give you money? All these states, 38 legal medical states, 25, adult use states. That's pretty good. Really, when you think about where we were in 2014 or 2012, that's a lot. That's a lot that's been,
But it's also when I worked in civil rights, that was when, President Obama was first elected. And then after that, we had difficulty getting funding because people were like, oh, we don't have civil rights issues anymore. We have a black president. Well, guess what? We're just getting started.
Guess what is right? Guess what? Trump came around the corner.
Yeah. The biggest backlash ever on that. Speaking of following and stuff, if people want to follow you and subscribe to Celebstoner, which I really suggest, if you are interested in cannabis culture, you got to follow Steve. If you don't already,
appreciate
you got to
that.
catch up.
People like to come to the Celebstoner group at Facebook. We have a nice group there, a lot of comments and a lot of back and forth. That's a fun group. I recommend that. The website Celebstoner for the latest news. The Patreon that Celebstoner has, we're trying to build, get more members. What you get out of that is a newsletter every week, and kind of any kind of help I can offer in any way. If you have a product that you're promoting, I'll promote it. We'll work out something. So once you become, a member of my Patreon group, you're my best friend. So I'll do anything for you, including you, Sarah. I'll promote your podcast, whatever. Just anything I see, I'll try and, use whatever I have in the group of people that follow the things that I do via Celebstoner at X and at LinkedIn and at, Facebook, which is kind of my main areas. LeafWire I use as well. There's a good places to kind of like support all that and, to get all the information. I mean, I feel like, people seem to like what's provided. I'm writing a newsletter even right now today, that'll go out there. And it's kind of unique. I do cover the news, but I kind of leave that to Marijuana Moment and others who are getting into the hard news of, last week when Florida, went on the ballot, I covered that. But I'm not going to cover every committee meeting like Marijuana Moment does. So, it's very particular type of culture coverage that you get at Celebstoner, which is kind of different from most of the websites out there. Kind of carved out my own little zone, and nobody seems to have come along to compete with it too much. So it's a good place to go if you just want good culture coverage, like review of like the latest TV show that's got a lot of weed in it, or movies, or music, sports, that kind of stuff that goes beyond, legalizing it from state to state, which can be, is important, but can be a little dull. So, I try to keep things sort of fun and interesting. That's sort of been my whole thing over the years. Just keep things sort of fun because it's a very serious subject. Let's still have some fun with it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of culture around what we do. Let's take advantage of that, and not just constantly just pour into the latest legislation.
It's a good reminder, Steve.
Good, which is important, but have fun while you're doing it. Try and have fun. Be serious, but have fun.
Yeah, I agree. It's a treat to be able to do the 420 special with you, and I'm really looking forward to our future conversations because we just have so much to talk about. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and everybody. Make sure you 420 at 420 on 420.
Right on. Until next time. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.